How do you go from posting stories to Reddit NoSleep to becoming a successful self-published author with readers from all around the world? Hi, my name is Marco and welcome to another episode of Storyline Sessions podcast. I'm proud to announce that my new guest is a fellow Serbian. Boris Bacic, or Boris Bacic as many readers know him, is a horror author who went from writing creepypastas to becoming a #1 bestseller on Amazon. His work also includes a children's book as well as 2 upcoming domestic thrillers. In this episode, we've discussed his journey from a security guard and a bodybuilder to where he is now, challenges that foreign authors face in the US market, as well as many other interesting topics. So, let's dive into another engaging storyline session with Boris. Enjoy! Hi Boris, welcome to Storyline Sessions. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. I don't get many interviews, so this is very nice. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. I'm really glad to host a fellow Serbian here. So we can start from that, because it was really interesting. When I first found out about your work, I didn't know who you were. And when I heard your stories on YouTube and read them, we'll go on further to explain where the people can find you. But when I found out that you were Serbian, I was really surprised because, a lot of fellow Serbian authors don't publish things in English, let alone almost exclusively in English. So that was really a selling point for me. And then it was also great because I'm also a fan of horror. So the things came together perfectly. So maybe we can start from there. How do you see your position as an author from Serbia and generally from Eastern Europe and generally people from our parts of the world are rarely perceived as authors who write for, let's say, Western market. Of course, you have fans, you have readers from around the world, but, it's still quite rare, even though we're in the era of self-publishing, that we can see people from, let's say, Serbia making it big in the Western region.
Right. So the thing is, this came as a surprise to me because when I first published my books and I started earning from them, I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm one of the only self-published authors who's actually making a living in Serbia. But then you find out that's actually not the case. You have so many authors here. Most of them are just using pen names, fake names, or they just don't want to talk. You know how Serbian people are. We just tend to kind of be secretive about certain successes and whatever. And I've sort of met a few people. A few people have contacted me in the past where they told me hey, I'm also publishing, I'm also self-publishing, and they've earned lots of good money. So it's impressive because this self-publishing industry has really kind of helped authors who never would have been accepted, for example, by literary agents to actually make a living for themselves. And it's even getting better because so many authors who have been trad published are now getting into the self-publishing industry. Like, for example, Adam Neville, I could be wrong, but he's a British horror author, and he was trad, and he is now self-published. He is actually, also earning good bucks. So I think that says a lot because people are starting to realize why would we go with publishers and lose 80-90% of the royalties when we can keep everything for ourselves. But coming back to the original question, so it's kind of a unique thing. I've only a few times gotten this recognition. I live all the way north in a small town in Serbia, and I'd never expected anybody to recognize me or whatever. And just a few weeks ago, I was at the gym, and the girl who works there, she was like, "Hey, my friends actually like your books." And I'm like, "Wow, somebody from Serbia reads my books," because my English is better than my Serbian. And initially that's one of the reasons why I decided to publish in English, but also because the market is a lot bigger. And believe me, I've investigated for Serbian, I wanted to distribute my books over here, but the problem is that it's very pricey. The distributors, the publishers, and all of them, they're taking so many cuts that in the end, you're barely going to make any money.
Have you tried to cut a deal or just investigated the market and found out that you couldn't do it?
Yeah, so I actually tried it. I did try some people, but it's very much a gate-kept community that first you need to find an agent. After you find an agent, you need to find a publisher. After you find a publisher, you need to find a distributor or something like that. It goes through so many hoops you need to jump through that it's just absolutely amazing. And then on top of that, when you do publish a book, let's say there was an option for me to publish a book with my own money. But if I did that, distributors, they take a huge chunk of it. And by the time my book even reaches those brick and mortar stores, I'm only going to get maybe $1 or $2, and that's not going to be enough. I would need to sell 1,000 copies just to break even, So I've tried it.
Exactly.
Yeah, like one way to do it is to actually be accepted by the publishers. I know some people from my town and so on who have been published like that, but it's a difficult thing, and self-published is not really seen in Serbia as something. It's not modernized yet. We're still waiting for it. Maybe when Serbia one day gets its own Amazon and whatever. But so far, it seems to be all the rage in the West, not so much over here.
Yeah, for sure. But it's great to hear that we do have authors, but it's a shame that it's under a pen name because, I didn't hear about them. And I think that I've done quite a bit of research, and I read a lot of authors from all around the world. And it's a shame we don't see that. And but you did have a book trad published, if I'm not mistaken, in Netherlands.
Yeah, that's right. There was a small press in the Netherlands called Butter Dragons Publishing. They published, I think it's like 3 of my books or something like that. And I was also published in an anthology by them, like 2 anthologies or something like that. A children's book even. I never would have written a children's book, but they liked a snippet that I had put in a horror book, and they decided to publish it. So yeah, I was published like that. I was exploring different options. I'm not ready to give up on trad publishing yet. I will try it again in the future. But for now, my goal was initially just to get some financial breathing space as a self-published author. I sort of have that now, but now that I do, I want to branch out and look for maybe we call those hybrid authors, the ones who go self-published plus trad, and you can basically get more people to read your book, more because those trad publishers, they have the means to put your book in front of readers that you can't really reach. They've been here for years. Small presses have like all these options that self-published authors don't have, and it's a nice thing to explore. But I think it's one of those things that you ultimately can't really rely on as in like to make a living unless you're really big,
Yeah, it's understandable. But I need to rewind a bit to the children's book. I need to ask how that came about. You said that you put a piece of it into your horror book, or how that happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. There was a zombie book I'd written for that same company called Till on Death Do Us Part. And in that book, there was a husband who was reading that children's book. And every couple of chapters, we would see like one chapter from that children's book. And the main point of the children's book was it was supposed to convey a certain point in the story. I can't say what because it's going to spoil things. And the publisher really liked it, and she decided like, hey, let's publish a children's book. Do you want to do it? And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, I'm not really a good writer for children's books, as you can probably tell from the stuff I write. But she was like, no, that's okay. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to hire somebody to do all the relevant editing, because when it comes to children's books, you can't really use words like death and violence and blood and whatever. So a lot of the things had to be cut out. But it's a very nice little book, like has a hardcover. There were even some dioramas that, she made for the promotions. It has illustrations in there. So it's really nice. I don't have it on me right now, but if I did, I'd show you. But it looks nice. I'm not sure if people buy it, though. But I think it's suitable for children, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and especially it ties in a bit to what it says on your Amazon bio that one of the readers compared you to R.L. Stine, who's like a children's horror writer, and who I read as a kid. I think that was one of my gateways to horror.
Yeah,
and,
we all started with him.
Yeah, and it's really awesome. And I think that maybe that's the tie-in, because there are some authors that combine those two, even though they look weird. I think that actually Stephen King had like full-on book which was let's say pulled out from his Dark Tower series about the train that they mention, and like he published it under a pen name as a children's book. So I think that's also a thing.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I think, but it's really an interesting way to consider like how things reach people. You know, that you never thought about writing a children's book, and
Yeah.
somebody was like, "Yeah, you could do that."
Yeah, there were like lots of things I didn't think I would write. I actually recently started getting into domestic thrillers. I had written domestic thrillers in the past, but the thing is, since I write so many different subgenres, I need to be in a very specific mood. So
Mhm.
I'm going to be writing, let's say, 4 to 5 paranormal books, and suddenly I'm going to be fed up, and I'm going to think, like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Let's go on to creature features. Or I'm going to finish creature features, I'm going to go into one thriller, and so on. But thrillers were like rarely traversed, but nowadays I got more into them. So I'm kind of branching out. I'm actually now working on a certain sort of like mystery action thriller as well. But that's the thing. That's the thing with horror, that there are so many subgenres and it's very diverse. And something that one person considers horror might not necessarily be horror for another person, and vice versa. And that's the beauty of it. I've read so many books that read more like dystopian or whatever, but people thought that they were horror, and that's fine
Mhm.
because it's a subjective feeling, so to say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some people. I listened to a podcast with another horror author, and he said like, I really can't stand the creature features. I don't like cryptids. I don't like stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
that doesn't do anything for me. I just like based on horror based on people, the real life stuff. And then
yeah,
like you have people who are obsessed with like say, let's say haunted houses and stuff like that. And I think that really shows the range. And recently we've moved on to especially in movies to let's call it elevated horror. I know a lot of horror authors don't like the term because it's derogatory to other kinds of horror, but it's interesting how it evolves, And
yeah.
how did your fans react to the newer stuff? I know that the domestic thrillers are just coming out and it's on pre-order, if I'm not mistaken. We can go
Yeah.
into a bit into that, but before we do, when you change like a bit, you have your stories that are based on creatures and stuff like that. And when you switch it up and go to another direction, does it affect in a way your audience? Do you get some comments about that?
Yeah, so usually what I do is before I publish any kind of newer book, like just recently I published a zombie series, which I had never done before. I always gauge my audience to see would they buy something like this, are they interested, and so on, because it's like a completely different genre when it comes to zombie stuff. When I published that series, I got completely new readers. There were some horror readers from my list that actually still bought my stuff because they love everything I read and they're going to buy it anyway. But many of them were like, you know what, this is not my thing, so I'm gonna wait for something else that you publish. And same goes with these thrillers. I've had some interest in them, but ultimately the ones I cultivated are the ones that like the pure horror, like paranormal stuff, even creature features. But when it comes to domestic thrillers, zombies, that's like considered usually a different either subgenre or completely different genre, and some of them just do not want to delve into that.
Are we talking about the Infected City series? Is that the one?
That's the
Yeah.
one, yeah.
And I was thinking about that, how do you keep it fresh, because that's one of the, let's say, horror tropes that's one of the oldest in, let's say, modern traditional horror, and we got a lot of stuff about zombies, but still the readers like it, and of course people do want to read it, watch it, play the games with it, but how do you approach that when you write something that's kind of done in multiple angles already, and a lot of popular media is about that? Do you think about the ways you can improve on it, approach it from a different angle? What's the appeal for you when you do that?
Yeah, so that's the beauty about writing books, that you don't need to necessarily be original all the time, because readers, sometimes it's good to just rehash, sometimes it's just good to visit something familiar, and they are totally fine with that because it gives them this feeling of nostalgia. Let's say, for example, if you write a book that's similar to a certain movie, people love that. People love reading something that reads like a movie. That's one thing I've noticed. Now, of course, I always try to be original when it comes to certain things, especially for zombies. We've seen it all. We've seen everything when it comes to zombies, and I do try to be original, but you can only be so original before it becomes another trope. So the one thing that I've learned from that is all you need is good character development, good cliffhangers, and people are going to keep reading. So it doesn't matter if it's the same thing over and over. People just seem to I sort of look at it like, I don't know, eating your certain favorite food. You're not going to eat it once and leave it. You're going to eat it over and over. Maybe you're going to get sick of it after a while if you eat it every day, but, some time passes, you're going to get back to it again. So that's just the one thing that, the beauty of the writing is you don't need to be as completely original. We've seen so many, especially for paranormal, so many repetitive books, so many with the same tropes, same endings, same kind of stupid mistakes that the main characters make, and we still devour those books because they give us this sense of familiarity and nostalgia.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it, and I definitely see that. I mean, a lot of writers explicitly compare their work to some of the work that's already out there to appeal to readers. And when you think about writing those series, this one has 5 or 6 books, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. 6 books, yeah. And when you write standalones, do you approach them differently? Do you decide this one is for sure going to be a series, or you find out later on? Are you a plotter and a pantser?
That's actually a really interesting question, because what happens is I'm usually a pantser. I'm usually a pantser for these things, but I so many times just corner myself that I'm going to write something. I'm going to write myself into a corner and I'm not going to know what to do. But this is also a good thing, because then I'm forced to think of certain solutions that I wouldn't otherwise think of for my characters and so on. Now, for the actual zombie series, that's the interesting part, is that it was actually supposed to be just a 1-part book. So I wrote it just from one character's perspective, and I was like, I'm just going to publish it as a standalone. But then I started thinking more, and I was like, I just left it there. I hadn't published it in like 3 or 4 months. It was just sitting there. And I was like, you know what? Why wouldn't I add multiple characters? Why not build some tension, or something like that? And I started working on those ideas. And then I had to completely change everything. I had to do another editing round, new covers and whatever, because everything was just so completely disorganized, which wouldn't have happened if I, had planned accordingly before I actually decided on publishing. But for most of my stories, I'm just going to go with I'm going to have a very vague outline. I know point A, point B. Now, the getting from point A to point B is actually the difficult part. And a lot of the times, even if I have a clear outline, it's just going to change a lot. The story is going to change because I'm going to get to a point and I'm going to see this is not going to work. This doesn't seem realistic, or this doesn't fit into this character's, personality. And then I need to change everything, or just go back and change. Well, sometimes it's like deleting chapters and chapters. So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe it can get tricky, because as you said, when you got just only a rough outline and you try to figure it out, but that's also a way a lot of writers do it. And I think that that part of the finding of the story can also surprise you, which is a good thing. I think that if you manage to surprise yourself, and even if you manage to scare yourself, I don't know if that still happens with you, but I think that is an awesome feeling.
Yeah, it does. You do get somewhat desensitized after a while, but what happens is, you can definitely, when you're a pantser, you can definitely surprise yourself, because you have this eureka moment, and when you're writing and you don't know what to do, and usually I take walks in the woods at night, and then I just have this feeling like, oh yes, this is exactly what I should do. I get this idea, and I just have to run back home and write it immediately, which you don't really get when you have a very clear outline. And us writers, we love to we hate editing. Most of us writers, we hate editing. And the reason for that is because somebody once said that when you're writing a book, you're like a god and you're creating your own world. You can do whatever you want. And I think that's more so true when you're a pantser, because you're not really following that many rules. You're just doing whatever you want. But when you're an editor, you're basically like the repair guy. You're cleaning everything up and fixing all that needs to be fixed, and we just hate that,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do have issues with editing, that it takes more than it takes to write it, and especially if you write a messy draft. But how do you work? Do you work with editors, beta readers? What's your process about that when you write your typical book?
Yeah, so usually I write a book, I let it sit for about 5 to 6 weeks. That was Stephen King's advice, just to let it sit for a while, because what happens is when you get back to it after that time, you can see it with a fresh pair of eyes, and you can see certain things that weren't there before, certain things that you can add. For me, it's usually just adding, not removing, it's just adding. And, it's like, the problem is, no matter how many times you go back, there's always going to be something to change. And if you do that, you're never going to publish a book, you know? So what I do is I let it sit for a little bit. I get back to it. I give it another read through. And if I'm happy with the way it looks, I send it off to the beta readers and see what they say. If they're happy with it, mostly I try to look for some kind of common ground, whether they hate the character or whatever, and try to change it accordingly, or the ending or whatever. Usually I stick with whatever ending I like, but that makes some people angry, but whatever. But after beta readers, then I'm finally ready to send it off to the editor. The editor finishes, I get the book ready, and then I just put it up for pre-order, and that's it.
And what's the feeling when you get it, like when it's up there, and especially when you got a print copy? How does that feel?
To me personally, it's and this is probably just me, but it's not really anything special, to be honest, because for me the magic is in the writing, and I'm enjoying that journey of writing. And once I'm done writing, that's it. I'm ready to move on to the next one. The only feeling I get when I put the book up there online is that I used to have this. I don't even have that anymore. It's like the first 2 days you're just dreading, waiting for those first reviews to come in, because if it's going to be a 1-star review, 2-star review, that's going to look really bad. But I'd gotten that in the past. It hasn't impacted the book at all, so I stopped worrying about it completely. And nowadays, when it's there, I just check the sales from time to time, and that's it. I'm just already completely immersed in my next book,
Yeah, I think that maybe that ties into your beginnings. We can roll a bit back with Reddit and the NoSleep subreddit, where you basically, as like a writer who had a lot less experience than you do now, had to put your work out there among all those other people who still write a large amount of stories each day, and see their comments. I believe that impacted the way you approach it.
Yeah, this was, even before I went on to NoSleep, I was listening to a lot of creepypasta narrators, and I used to like write from time to time, but I wasn't really publishing seriously. And then after a while, I did start publishing. First, it was the creepypasta.com website, and then I moved on to NoSleep. And I didn't get any traction at all. There was nothing. So maybe like 10 likes or whatever, 10 upvotes, whatever it is. And I was like, I remember I wrote the story that is now Infected City. I had written that, and I was like, you know what? If this story doesn't get any traction, I'm done. I'm not going to write anymore because I'm just not cut out for this. This was a really wrong approach, really wrong way to look at things, because getting upvotes, a lot of it is marketing. A lot of it is like, how catchy is your title? What time are you going to post it? How long is the story going to be? And there are so many factors there that can contribute to that. And I've seen that later, because some of my stories had gotten, like, the ones that were really good, had gotten like maybe 100 upvotes, and some that I considered to be really bad, almost 8,000 or whatever. But anyway, so that story for Infected City, I posted it. It exploded for some reason, got a lot of traction, so I continued writing, and from there it was pretty smooth sailing. I don't know how it happened. Probably just a combination of luck and, maybe a little bit of I don't want to say talent, but I'd say hard work. And since then, it just went, a lot more smoothly, because, I remember like listening to those creepypasta narrators, and I was thinking, I wish that I would really like one of them to read my stories. I was really into Creepypasta, Mr. Creepypasta, King Spook, and some other ones over there, and sure enough, some of them did actually end up contacting me and narrating my stories, and that was a huge honor for me. That was a huge beginning for me, because that's how I earned my first payment from my books. And then people started asking for, well, stories, not books. And then people started asking, when I'm going to publish my books. And back then it was not even in my distant plan to publish anything. But so many people started asking about it. And then I somehow eventually got into that. So that was like this culmination of how things happened for me. It all started with Creepypasta and NoSleep.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen an evolution of a lot of authors that started from the creepypasta space, and the great stories that developed far beyond what they've initially thought out. Like, as you said, you've created a series from your story, and like things such as Slenderman, which created a bunch of media.
Yeah.
More recently, we've had the Backrooms, which have exploded. And what do you think about generally the creepypasta space? What is it that's so appealing to people, which is kind of different than just, let's say, traditional horror space?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the traditional stuff, it's kind of a slow burn. Sometimes it's more of an existential primordial kind of fear. Whereas for creepypasta, it really packs a punch. You're gonna read it, you're gonna read one final line, and it's gonna be just chills over your body, and people love that. It's sort of like adrenaline, and I think they're really addicted to that sort of a short burst scare, so to say. Because rather than reading Stephen King and all that, you have this slow build up that culminates into something terrifying, but it's terrifying in a way that makes you think about it for days. This one, however, is like something that makes you sleep with the lights on, and there's a huge difference, and I think a lot of people are attracted to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, when you think about it, as you said, like those last lines, it's almost like a punchline to a joke.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
and yeah, sorry. And I was thinking about those authors you mentioned on YouTube, those narrators, and that's the way I've discovered you. And like when you think about it, these stories which have a life on their own, and those spaces where authors have a chance to be under the spotlight, and people who find stories these ways, there are a lot of people who almost exclusively just listen to stuff, don't read it. And do you prefer to listen to the stories, or do you read them? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, so I do a combination. I used to do only listening, while I was at work. I had the kind of job where I would just stare at the cameras all day long, so I had more than enough time to listen to hours and hours of creepypastas on end. Nowadays, I do a combo. I prefer like reading in silence, but again, it depends on my mood. Sometimes when I'm at the gym, I'm just going to listen to audiobooks, or when I'm taking a walk, I'm going to listen to it. I think for horror specifically, there's a certain charm in audiobooks that can be invoked, that can't be invoked on the pages as it can be in audio, because there's so many ways you can build that dread. These narrators, like not just the narration, but there are so many that add these sound effects, footsteps and screaming, and whatever, certain creepy music, and that really adds to certain atmospheric elements which are not on the pages. Whereas, the caveat is on the pages themselves. When you're reading them, you kind of use your imagination, so the way you perceive something is going to be different from the way I perceive it a lot of times. So something that scares you, or something that's, let's say, emotional or whatever, sentimental to you, may be different than what it is to me. So that's like the beauty of that. Both have their nice sides. I really like both, honestly.
And how did you decide to put out your books in audio form in your channel? Because you first were discovered by those narrators, and when things started rolling, did you assume that like maybe you can get a space of your own for that kind of stuff? Did you consider like doing it on Audible? Because if I'm not mistaken, you're a part of the Amazon Unlimited, Kindle Unlimited program. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so what happened was I hadn't even planned on making audiobooks because they're sort of pricey. But I was contacted by a certain company, and they wanted me to give them the rights to my audiobook for a certain book. However, the rates were not very favorable. I would only get about, I think, 10% of the royalties, 20%, something like that. And, I looked around and I was thinking, what, why should I do that? I can just publish it myself and keep the royalties. So that's what I did. I hired a couple of narrators. I, published a few books, and I started putting them out there on Audible and so on. Now, the good thing about Amazon is that, it's the Kindle Unlimited thing is only for ebooks. So your print books, audiobooks, hardbacks, whatever else can be everywhere. You don't need to be exclusive with them, including Audible. So I published on a certain place called Findaway Voices, and that's where they basically publish it for you to like over 40 retailers. And I was seeing some sales, but then I started hearing a lot of buzz forming around people putting their books up on YouTube. And I was like, why would you put it on YouTube if for free when you can sell it like this? And they were like, no, 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 you actually have two different audiences there. YouTubers just stay on YouTube. They don't go into Audible and whatever else most of the time. And you get good revenue from, the ads. So I started putting up my books there in the hopes of monetizing my channel. It's still not monetized yet. I'm about 500 subscribers short, but I have heard a lot of success stories, and I have friends in America who were authors and who have also done the same thing, and they are earning really nice money from audiobooks, and they don't even have a lot of subscribers or a lot of audiobooks. So there's a lot of potential in all of that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting approach. And when you think about the self-publishing space, a lot of more like both revenue streams and promotion opportunities are opening up. And I think that's also one thing that's really important is building your fan base, your audience. And I think you really are engaged fully with building your own community. And I think that's really important, because when you look at it, you don't have like millions of subscribers, but you do have engaging audience. When you think about, there are a lot of people and brands who have thousands upon thousands people following them, but no engagement. And I think that's really interesting, getting that core base. And what was your initial, like, let's not say plan, but how did you approach that, building a community?
Yeah, so the first plan was that I had no plan, and that was a big mistake, because if I had actually planned something right from the start, things would have been different. I would have had a huger audience now. So back when I started out, I was just publishing on Amazon. I didn't even have a newsletter list, and so many people said it's an important thing to have a list. And then I did make a newsletter list, but it was a mess because I was using certain providers that just bundled everything together, and I just didn't see any traction from it. But now that I'm looking at it from a business perspective, that's what there's a certain mind shift that needs to happen, mindset shift needs to happen, that you're not just an author when you're self-published. You're basically a business owner, and you need to act like a business owner. And I see so many people getting emotional about their books, like certain reviews, Amazon taking their books down, and then they decide they're not going to publish with Amazon anymore. You can't do that because it's a business, and you can't take it personally. So I started looking at it from, a customer relations sort of a perspective, and I started to kind of raise awareness, brand awareness. I'm trying to build my own brand. That when somebody sees the name Boris, they, in the horror community, they think about me. It's like very interesting because what happens is, like on TikTok, for example, I went viral with certain videos and I got like 20 something thousand followers, but on Instagram I have maybe 600. But those 600 followers are way more engaging than the 20 something thousand I have on TikTok, So that kind of goes to show it doesn't really matter how many you have. It's going to build up over time as long as you just follow the brand awareness and the consistency for your product. You just need to show to the people who you are. That's one thing. And you need to be genuine, because people, especially readers, are so good at determining if somebody is a fake, And once they determine that, they're not going to stick for long. I have no idea where they get that superpower, but it's there. I've noticed that, and even with my books, they can notice if I've written something because I liked writing it, or if I wrote something because I thought it would be popular. There is a huge difference, and they can notice it from the get-go. So now I'm kind of working slowly on building my community in a way that, like I said, it doesn't need to be a big community. Just readers who know the name Boris, Bacic, Bacic, however you want to call me. I stick with Bacic because it's just more basic to know. So I'm kind of working on that. I have a better list now. So like for my newsletter, for example, I know exactly. I segment them into groups. People who came from TikTok, people who came from Instagram, people who came here because they like my stuff, people who clicked this 10 times, 20 times, whatever, what time they clicked it, how many times they clicked. So I have everything very formulated so they can know and learn from those experiences and just get to know what can I do to provide better quality for my readers,
Yeah, for sure. And I think it seems to be working. And when you think about those things that you mentioned, that being genuine is what appeals to the audience. I've discussed this with one of my previous guests, that people are increasingly getting fed up with overproduced stuff. And like on YouTube, people who aren't authors but have different types of videos when it's production crew, expensive cameras. And I think that's one of the reasons that TikTok blew up, because people are more organic there. Of course, there are influencers, brands who are then using those audiences and not being genuine, but a lot of people, and especially authors, creators of different types of art like music, are getting popular because they are more raw, and the people understand that. And I think that's a good segue. I wanted to ask you. You mentioned a bit about your job where you look at the cameras, and one of your maybe signature stories is about that. And basically, that's mostly your own experience. And how did that come upon? Did you think about when you were working? Were there those stories brewing when you were there, or maybe you looked back upon it and thought, "Wow, this could be a great story"?
Yeah, so back when I was working as a security guard back then, when I was looking at the cameras, but I wasn't that much into creepypastas back then. But afterward, I got another job where, again, I had to look at the cameras. That's when I started getting into creepypastas. And that's when I looked back onto my security guard job. I was a huge fan of the search and rescue officer stories on NoSleep, and I was really inspired by that. I was like, you know what if somebody made a story like that, but from the perspective of a security guard? And that actually sat in my head for, I think, a solid year or something like that. And I just started getting all these ideas, like a company that takes care of certain things that just cannot be explained, or have these unexplained phenomena. And I started, I wrote one short part of it. It, again, got a lot of traction, which I hadn't expected. I just wrote it for myself mostly, but it got a lot of traction. And to this day, that is one of, like you said, a signature stories on No Sleep. That even to this day, I get tagged in posts, like people, asking like, "Hey, can somebody tell me what's the name of this security story? I can't remember. I read it years ago." And it's like when somebody mentions security guard or night guard and No Sleep, that's like the first thing that people usually think about, and that's very flattering, very humbling, to know that I've sort of left my, I don't want to say legend because that's pretentious, but I've left sort of a small impact on the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's no small feat, and I think that's really something that should be pointed out. And a lot of those personal experience translate to really good stories. And I was also thinking about when I contacted you and when I was preparing for our talk, I realized that a while back I listened to a story about Northern Lights. And I realized later on that it was also your story, and I really enjoyed it. I was on a trip, like it was a night ride somewhere, and I played it while I was riding there, and it's really evocative. And then recently I saw on your Instagram that you were on Iceland, and I thought about, was it something that were you there before, or was the story and exploring and researching for the story that inspired you to go there?
Yeah, so first of all, the Northern Lights, I'm glad you listened to that one. That one still seems to be popular as a short story. As the book, nothing. There's crickets. That's really interesting, but that's probably because I took a completely different approach with the book. I wanted to do something original, but it sort of failed. But the short story, people still talk about it. People still love it. They say it's very emotional. So that's really nice. Now, the thing is, I had not been to Iceland before. At the time of the writing of the story, this was my first time, by the way, that I had visited Iceland. And I really didn't have that much experience, just like I don't have with when I'm writing books set in America and so on. I just use a lot of Google Maps. There's a YouTube channel that I follow, which is about a moving company, and they have a 4K videos of them just driving through the countryside and through the cities, and I just take notes like, okay, it takes 10 minutes to get from Taco Bell to whatever place, So I follow those kind of things. And for Iceland itself, when I went there this time, it wasn't for research. I just wanted to go there for a very long time, because there are just so many things that I saw with on pictures and videos and so on, and I really wanted to see it. And as a horror author, it's really difficult to get inspiration in Iceland, because there's so many things that, for a fantasy author, for example, you would get a ton of inspiration because everything is reminiscent of Tolkien and J.R.R. Martin and so on, all their works. But for horror authors, it's very difficult because everything is just too beautiful. The nature, the northern lights, and all that. I was lucky enough to see those, by the way. And everything is too nice, and there's just no way to think of any story. At least for me, it was. And it's like I usually get a lot of inspiration from anything. I could just be sitting and staring at the wall in my house and I can get an idea. But for Iceland, it was so difficult because I was not thinking as an author. I was there as just a person, so to say, and I was just enjoying. I was so absorbed in the nature that I didn't really have time to stop and reflect on what would make a good horror story over here. So, yeah, that was just for pleasure. Unfortunately, no inspiration this time, but maybe next time I'll focus on that instead.
Yeah, but it's a great story nonetheless, and I think that the method that you use to research the US and the stuff that you mentioned, it's really cool because I was really wondering because a lot of authors do place their stories out west, especially authors from the East who want to get closer to the audiences there, but it somewhat reads a lot of the times that you can tell that people are just basing it off movies and stuff like that, and I think that explains a lot how your stories could be interpreted that they were written by a native, because as I also mentioned that I really found out later on that we were both from the same country.
Yeah.
And I really think that that's one way to explain that. Another thing that you mentioned that's also interesting to me is the gym side, and that like you were into bodybuilding and powerlifting, and you were into that for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And you listen to books while you work out.
Yeah, I do that nowadays. It's like I used to listen to creepypastas or just some music. Nowadays I do listen to audiobooks as well because I sort of think of it as being productive while I'm there. I'm not big into bodybuilding anymore. I have kind of given up on that. I just work out just to be healthy these days. Just to have some stamina and strength and so on, but I don't work out for the body, and that's a good thing because that's also one interesting story that happened. The reason why I started writing in the first place was because I had a bodybuilding injury. So I'd injured my back doing squats and deadlifts, and I was for a while told that I couldn't do any lifting anymore at all, which was a misconception. This was a wrong thing to say. I can still lift normally nowadays, but back then I didn't know this, and I had like a complete collapse of my identity. And I started to think, what can I do next? Because back then I identified as being a bodybuilder. That was my whole identity, And I thought, like, what am I going to do next? And it took me a long time, but I started writing. That's when I started actually writing, and I got into it, and that's where I, kind of found my calling, so to say. It was sort of a blessing in disguise. I injured my back, but if that hadn't happened, I probably would have just continued lifting weights, and that would be all of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I believe that, like, even though a lot of people would never put those two together, physical activities and especially those taxing things such as bodybuilding, opposed to writing books, but I think that the discipline that you got from that must be of use in your writing process.
It used to be good for certain things, but it also had a counter effect. So I used to be very disciplined for dieting and so on. The discipline was great there, but then I just kind of burnt myself out, I did carry some of it into my writing. So like the hard work, the persistence, but I think that's not so much the bodybuilding aspect of it as it is just my personality that I'm sort of stubborn. I'm persistent, if a door closes, I just ram it until it breaks down. So that's probably maybe partially from bodybuilding, but most of it is just me. So, yeah.
And when you think about like that transition, and did you ever think about like if that didn't pan out, would you try something like different of a genre, different of a medium? Would you consider like writing for, I don't know, like screenwriting or maybe even games? Did you like try your hand in writing different types of stuff, or it was stories and books from the start?
Yeah, so funny thing is, a lot of authors who don't succeed in their genre, they move on to erotica. And erotica sells really well, apparently. I haven't tried, so I wouldn't know. That's why so many of them have pen names from Serbia, because they're writing questionable things. And I'm not talking about just erotica, but we're talking about like monster erotica and stuff like that. That apparently sells like crazy. But the funny thing is, for horror genre, everybody when they started out they kept telling me that horror is impossible to make work. It's impossible to make a living off of it because the community is very small. There's just not enough people. And it's true that horror is very small. Like, for example, what I'm making from horror, I would be making 3 times as much in some other genres, like romance or whatever. It's just not a very lucrative genre. But when I got into it, it wasn't for the money. I did it because I like writing. I wanted to write what I like to write. I wouldn't want to write something that's just going to feel like another job. Because the main point of this was so that I could do something I love and not work for somebody and so on. But I, just like with everything, I stayed persistent. I didn't want to believe that it's impossible to make a living off of it. And I just kept publishing, and it just worked out really well for me. But I did consider for a while that if that didn't work, I would either go into writing like sci-fi or action thrillers, something down the line, or domestic thrillers even sell really well compared to horror. I just wanted to look for something that's as close to horror as possible, even if it's not, horror itself. So definitely what I want to do, I do want to continue writing, whatever the genre, but there are just some genres that I'm probably not going to delve into. So, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a thing that I mentioned before that I read an advice. If you're in it for the money, there are far more lucrative things to do than writing. Even if it's erotica, you can make money the easier ways than just writing.
Yeah.
But when you think about other genres, I think you've announced that you're co-writing a sci-fi horror book. It's like a mashup of genres.
Yeah.
And how's that going? It's really rare to see, especially in the self-publishing space, somebody co-writing a book. I don't know, how's that process going? Is it different from your usual process? Could you walk us through it?
Yeah, so this is the first time I'm co-writing a book with somebody. This is with a author friend of mine from Texas called David Virgutz. He has, I think, about 18 or 20 books published under his name. He's really good when it comes to publishing. Like, he really knows the market. He really knows how to run ads. He's done his research, which is very rare because when I speak to authors, they have so many questions, and it's like I usually start with the basic explanations. But when he contacted me, when I started explaining it, I could just tell he knows everything. He just really knew way more than even I do. And the co-writing process, so he approached me to ask if I want to write a space horror book, because there's just not enough space horror, And we were thinking something like the movie Event Horizon or the video game Dead Space, because, there's just not enough of those. There was The Luminous Dead and there was Dead Silence, those books, but they were just not there's just not enough of them. That's the thing. And so when we started doing the outline, the basic thing was we just went on a call, we made an outline, we're both pretty agreeable, so that was easy to, we had like the same idea, similar thinking and so on. That was not a problem. And what we do these days when we do actually work on the book, he's going to write something, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to write something else. We're going to re-edit each other's, paragraphs so that we can blend the styles. And once we do it like 10, 15 times, hopefully not that many times, it's going to look indistinguishable. Because my main question was, and this is something I had wondered for so long, is like when I see books that have been written by multiple authors, I didn't understand, how does that work? How do they agree? How do the readers not recognize different styles? But what actually happens is they blend everything together, and then it works really nicely. So right now we're just trudging on through the book. We're getting toward finishing it. We're maybe down the middle, so we're going to be working more. These days I couldn't work on it because I was on my trip, but now that we're back, we're going to get back to it full swing. And I'm not sure when the release date is going to be. We had planned for Halloween, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be possible at this point. So we're probably going to slate it for maybe next week, next year, not next week.
Do you have a final title? Did you agree on that?
Yeah, we have the title and the cover, and the title is Astrophobia. So I think the cover, the readers, from what we've gauged, they love it. They're really excited for it because, again, it's like one of those things that we don't see a lot. We see a lot of haunted houses, we see a lot of cryptids, creature features. We don't see enough space horror, and we don't see enough deep sea horror. So these are some things that I like to explore as well.
Yeah, I think that deep sea horror is one that's really exciting to me. I really love that, and that's really something that's not explored in any media enough, in my opinion. Like, there's a movie here and there, maybe a game once in a while, but it's something that seems like something that would be so inspiring to a lot of others, but it's really not out there. Like, you have things that maybe even started the whole motions of the horror, like H.P. Lovecraft, who was basically, I mean, his horror wasn't directly tied to the sea and the oceans, but like his old ones were under the sea and things like that, and people didn't draw a lot from it. I mean, people tie into space a bit, but as you said, that's also not explored that much. But there was like a movie a couple of years ago, I don't know if you see it, if you saw it, I think that's Underwater. Yeah, I think that was really interesting movie, and I think that really did well with the audiences. It wasn't like a masterpiece, but I think people really showed that they do have interest for those kinds of stories.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. When it comes to deep sea, space we can even somehow portray. It's easier to portray because we have so much experience with astronauts being up there. But for deep sea horror, it's just not explored at all. And you got to be really careful with how you convey the sense of like despair and hopelessness and claustrophobia. Because you need to, like, this is the one thing that really terrified me about, the ocean, that, you can go down there, there's no light at all. The pressure is so immense it can crush you into nothingness. The creatures that live there, the fact that we've explored only like 2 or 5%, I can't remember, of the ocean floor. There are just so many intriguing things. It's just a treasure trove for horror authors over there.
Yeah, and the atmosphere, as you said, I think that's something that I'm looking forward to see in your book that you're co-writing in space. I think that's something that can really shine because, we do have some environments that we're used to being as readers or as the audiences for a movie or a game, but I think those are something different. And it's no wonder that like series as Alien or stuff like that is really successful. Of course, aside from that, they're done correctly and that the writers and directors did their job well. But I think that it's something in people who want to see those type of stories. And for example, your series on small towns, I think it's not exactly the same thing as like space or undersea, but it's kind of a separate setting for itself, even though it's a bunch of places. When you think about smaller towns, and it's something that even like people who are in the horror genre, for like example Stephen King, have used, and I think that people really do respond well to that. And it's not just a horror thing, but it's also crime thrillers, noir stuff is also often set in small towns. Do you think that there's a specific reason that those stories resonate so well?
I think when it comes to these things, it's atmospheric horror really does a lot for readers because with atmosphere, it's sort of like getting into the head of the reader, but also the character. And you're able to perceive things, everything is a threat, so to say. So it's like, that's why space horror and deep sea horror is so scary, because when you're out in the street, you're used to car noises and footsteps and people chattering, but when you're up in space and you hear the creaking of the station, and certain echoes down the corridor, it's something you're not really used to, and everything is terrifying, because everything seems like a threat. And I think a lot of it, thanks to H.P. Lovecraft, because of his influence with the cosmic horror, I think so much of it is thanks to him. Like for example, in my book Retown, I focus so much on just making the town itself scary. So not the people, not like the fact that the guy just whatever he's going through, that's scary, but the town itself. and that it's sort of like malleable in a way that, you look at the town and you're wondering, is this thing alive? Is this town alive? Or is there something living in the town? Or is this just my imagination? And there are just so many outcomes that can be perceived in so many ways. And the fear of the unknown, that is always the one that, packs the most punch.
And is it also a thing that works for you? You mentioned Event Horizon. What are some of the movies that do it for you? Maybe not just flat out scare you, but as you are a horror author, you maybe have a higher tolerance for those things than a lot of people. But is there something that still works for you and makes you uncomfortable?
Yeah, so once in a while I'm going to run into a good horror movie. The one that recently scared me was Hereditary. Hereditary was, and it's so divided. You can hear people saying either it's really good or it really sucks. There's no in between. And for me, it's just, I loved that buildup of suspense, that you're just constantly in anticipation, waiting for something to happen, and you don't know when, you don't know if, something another person said is, a threat or, just a meaningless remark. Same goes with the movie Midsommar. Midsommar was also atmospheric like that. And I think Jordan Peele's movies also are like that. They're very atmospheric. That even just from the basic sounds, like he amplifies the sounds, like let's say of a screw falling to the floor, or just drinking water from glass, and it's just that silence and that noise being against the silence is so unnerving, and you're just constantly just on edge waiting for something to happen. I think those kind of movies are masterfully done, rather than, like when you have just a cheap jump scare with a ghost face jumping in front of you or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Hereditary is really one of my favorite horror movies of all time, as I've seen it twice now. And I think that one of the things that work for me is that the human factor, the build-up is just like, it's not waiting in a lot of horror movies, you just wait for stuff to happen to the people and you're like, yeah, this is the build-up for this to happen. But I think that when you think about those reactions, and I think that's rarely seen generally in films, to have such human raw emotions included in stuff that's happening. And I think that even though it gets into the supernatural part of things, it still feels grounded, and I think that's something that's really lacking in a lot of films and generally in horror media.
Yeah, definitely it requires a lot of self-exploration and character exploration. And this is something that books can do really well, that, you can see inside the characters' heads and see the battle that they're waging, in there, wondering, should they go against this threat, or is this a threat, and all, and so on. And there are just so many things that can be contributed, whereas movies, they need to focus on the visual and the auditory stimuli to actually get us to be afraid. But books are really good at conveying those certain emotions, and that's why, for example, Stephen King, I think, was really good. He's still alive, is good because he's able to, like, I remember when I read Pet Sematary for the first time, he is really good at describing this terror that the characters feel when something bad happens, like when somebody dies or whatever, and those scenes stuck with me for days afterward. And I think that's the trait of a really good storytelling, because you're able to convey this, and that kind of horror is different than, the jump scare, than the atmospheric. Each type of horror, it's like we talked about it before, it's subjective. Some people just like it extreme, for example, extreme horror where, people are getting massacred. Some people like it, when it's, tense. Some people just, love it when it's just waiting for a paranormal activity to happen. So it's all about preferences in this case.
Yeah, and I listened to an interview you've done a while back where you talked about your characters, and you said that you had some issues with your characters in your writing. And yeah. Could you maybe expand a bit on that?
Yeah, so the thing is with characters, the short answer is I'm really bad at developing characters. I try to kind of make them realistic, but sometimes that goes into either they go too realistic so they become annoying, or they're just one-dimensional. I'm getting better with that, just with a lot of things. Back when I used to write, at the start, I would get a lot of readers telling me, like, hey, you wrote this story, you set it in Oregon, but this is not what Oregon looks like. This is not what, the town looks like. And I eventually learned from that and improved it. Now, it's like people tell me, I drove through Oregon and it reminded me of your books, So there's that factor, But for characters, this is like, it can be a hit or miss. It's very difficult. It's very complex because you can never tell what is the audience going to resonate with. You need to find, some kind of common ground, but not too common, something that's going to have them empathize with the character. And that's the only way they're really going to care whether he survives or not. Otherwise, they're just going to be rooting for his death. So
I think that's really, really this thing you said that you don't know what's going to resonate with people. I think that ties in great with the honesty thing we talked about. If you poured it in and you think, okay, this is something that I think works, people are most likely to find something same. If it works for you, I think it should work for other people. And when you start thinking about the market and quote unquote audience that maybe doesn't even exist, you're bound to make something that you wouldn't make. And when we're talking about Ari Aster's movies, and Midsommar is something that's set in Scandinavia, and it's something of a, let's say, rural horror, and we're talking about Oregon, the US, and even Iceland, but have you considered putting our setting here, like Serbia or generally Eastern Europe, more into your stories, and do you think that's something that would resonate with a broader audience?
So I have considered it. Yes, there are some nice urban legends over here. Like recently, the Serbian singing lady had gone viral. There's a lot of legends about that. And my grandmother and mother used to tell me a lot of scary stories because they lived in a village. I have written one story set in. It was actually in Bosnia, not in Serbia, but it was basically about it was sort of political. Let's just put it that way. Even though it had nothing to do with politics, it was about the war that happened in the 90s, and I made basically like a slasher movie out of it. And Serbs were not very happy about it because of the way I represented that particular group of people. So these days you need to be very specific. You need to be very careful with what you represent and how you represent it. But if I were to delve into that, I would definitely go with something like an urban legend or some kind of paranormal stuff. I've written one book that was set also in Eastern Europe, which is It Lives in the Woods, and this one is a creature feature. And people love this one as well, and I think it may be because of that genuity, because they can see that the forests of Europe and whatever, the way I describe them, they're more authentic than the ones I would describe in America. So I'm considering like future stories, putting them here, but it's like, again, since my market is America, and there's not so many people who are familiar with these regions. They're familiar with Europe, but they're not so familiar with certain folklore and so on. And if I were to put something there, I would definitely go with something based on folklore.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really fertile ground for horror here. A lot of urban legends, stories that people tell, and even as they say, I mean, I know there's a bit debate about it, but a lot of people say that vampire or vampir is a Serbian word that's really caught on in the rest of the world, and stuff like that, which are basically almost told as historical here, are quite a bit horror. And it's interesting when you think about that and when you transpose it to people, what they are reading and watching here, and the way the people that deal with genre fiction here. I did a solo episode talking about fiction and the way the people react to fiction generally, and especially horror. I think that there is a lot of stigma still about writing and reading genre. And did you have some issues with people around you? I mean, what are the reactions? I know you exclusively write in English, but still there must be some people around you that are into reading, at least trying to read it. How were the reactions about that?
Yeah, so there are some funny reactions I got. Most people, when they say horror, they immediately think Satanism and being basically a heathen. Since I'm actually right now learning Hungarian, and my Hungarian teacher, when I told her I write horror, she was appalled. She asked me like, what do you think God would say about this? And I told her, well, I'm not writing about sacrificing humans and demons and whatever. And even if I did, that's fiction. That's just fiction. I'm not worshiping the devil or anything like that. and there's just a lot of this kind of a weird look I get when I say I write horror. So most of the time these days, when somebody does ask me what I write, I just say thrillers, because they don't give me these perplexed gazes or disgusted gazes. They just basically tell me like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, I like thrillers, and that's how I end it mostly.
Understandable, but I think that we do have a tradition of, like, especially in movies, thinking about some older stuff that people did here. It's really a shame that it didn't translate into modern times. One of our rare exports here is the Serbian film, which
Right.
is quite infamous around the world, and people mostly recognize that, but there's a lot of stuff that's just not out there, and I think that people could do it if there was more support, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think that stance here is a bit strict on that. I mean, maybe not just here, but what we see.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like for a few years, it's luckily died down now. But for a few years, whenever somebody on Facebook would mention Serbia or Serbian, the first comment that would reply to that would be, "Don't watch a Serbian film." It was like everything related to Serbia was not about Serbian film, which was terrible because I haven't watched the movie. I know what it's about though. I don't plan to watch it because of it. But it's like there's not just around the world, but especially over here up north where I live, there's still some stigma. It's better than it used to be because now so many people from other regions have moved in, and they're more progressive, they're more open to certain things, but I still get certain weird looks when I say I'm a horror author.
And talking about film, you mentioned a while back that there were some talks about making a short film based on your work, but it didn't pan out. Is there something on the horizon, movie or short film wise, or even animation for you?
So the last time I spoke, this was a group in Germany. They were working on the security guard movie. However, nothing came of it. There was COVID, and then we just kind of lost communication. I'm not sure they're going to continue working on it. Probably not. But I was thinking of, making, a screenplay and pitching the ideas to certain agents or whatever, that would eventually maybe deliver it to Netflix and so on. Now, it's a long shot. It's a really long shot. But the ideal thing would be that if I had enough money, I would make my own movie, based on my book. That would be the ideal solution. However, that is right now not possible. And the chances of being optioned for a movie or a mini, series are very slim. And it's a shame because I know probably everybody thinks for their own books that they would make a great mini series or movie or whatever, but a lot of readers have come forward to tell me that they would love to see certain books as a series. So that was very flattering. What's going to happen in the future, I'm not really sure, but I will work on it in the near future.
And if you had like an opportunity to choose, you said you have the inspiration to make it yourself, and I assume you would be the screenwriter, maybe even an actor. But if you chose like some perfect director for your work, maybe you choose a film or TV series, who would you choose to do an adaptation of your work?
That's a good question. I would naturally have to say the guy who made Hereditary. I would want to be approached by him. But not necessarily. There's another director. There was a movie, and I can't remember what it's called. Either level 16, I think. It's a small budget movie, but it was really, really good. And I think it's a Dutch producer. I can't really remember the name. And she was really good. I was really, blown away by that movie. So she's good. I would also like to work with Jordan Peele. I think if he worked with me, he would definitely make a masterpiece. That's for sure that he would make a masterpiece. So if I were to choose something like that, it's just that it's difficult choosing which book to work on because there's so many, and I'm very emotionally attached to some books. So it would be difficult to choose. I would have to go with what's the most popular one. And right now, the zombie one is the most popular one, but I don't want to make that into a TV series. I would rather go with something like Radio Tower or something small town. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that's quite catchy. Even still, there's a series called From, which is quite popular. I think they're up for third season now. I think that's something that could work similarly to your Radio Tower series.
Yeah, so many people have told me that when they read Radio Tower and Retown, that it gave them the From vibes. And I was like, yes, when I did watch the TV show, I was like, wow, yeah, this is very similar to, some of the books that I've written. And, it's cool. It's cool because I've never seen an adaptation of something like that related to. It's like we've seen movies of small towns, sinister small towns, but nothing like this, nothing of this scale. It was very refreshing to see it unfold in the way it did. So I am looking forward to the third season of From.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that the thing that's quite making it tougher for the show to reach even more audiences, I believe, is the title. It's really interesting that they decided to go with From. It's an SEO nightmare searching the series.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like when you type in From on Google, you have to type in From TV show or From MGM or whatever they have. It's so difficult to find it actually. So yeah.
Yeah, and opposed to that, I think that a lot of your titles are quite catchy for some type of adaptations, especially that they come from and those series.
Yeah.
I think that's something that really translates well. You know what you're getting yourself into, and you instinctively you want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Yeah, but
what's going on?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like it's maybe too simple. Because there are so many people who have made similar things. There's I've seen there was one called, I think They Came from the Camp or something like that. So there's a lot of They Came and It Lives and whatever kind of a thing. It's when you search it, you can find multiple books. So that's one thing. But the good thing is there's no copyright on the titles, so you can call your book whatever you want.
Yeah, for me, it's reminiscent of like those kind of older films from like maybe the 80s or those exploitation stuff with the aliens and the monsters from outer space. I know that's like not the genre you're writing, but that rings a bell for that.
Yeah.
And do you consider that as well when you're like considering putting out your book? How much of an impact do you place on the titles and things like that?
Yeah. So the title, firstly, the most important one I think is the cover. The cover is right there to grab the attention, even though they say don't judge a book by its cover. The cover is the first thing they judge.
Yeah, that's not true for a while now.
Yeah. And for the title, it's important because I've seen some authors making books that have huge titles that nobody can remember. And I remember specifically one author, he was an aspiring author back then. He wanted to release a book called Pernicious Proclivities. And everybody was like, why are you calling it that? Like, are you just sitting on your thesaurus? Like, what is this? And then he renamed the book to Sinister Intentions, which is much better than Pernicious Proclivities. So a title, it can to a certain extent impact your sales, but only if it kind of like feels like it doesn't fit the genre standard. Like, for example, my domestic thriller Maria didn't sell at all. And I think it's number one because the cover is more horror. The title is horror or sort of like romance. Because all these titles for domestic thrillers, they're like Never Lie or Stay With Me or whatever. Things like these that are kind of poetic. And, Maria is just Maria. And it was kind of like in a limbo. The blurb said it's domestic thriller, the cover and the title said it's horror, and it was like in no man's land and nobody wanted to buy it. So to a certain extent it can impact it based on the genre standard, but it's not going to play like a huge role.
And how do you do your covers? Do you have a standard artist that you go to on a regular now, or do you like shop around?
Yeah, so there's a website I recently found called thecovercollection.com. And I usually stick with them for pre-made covers because they have like a collection of all these covers you can choose from. And since I'm really bad at deciding like what I want on my cover, I just write the story and then I go onto the website and I scroll through until I find something that might look like it fits into my book, And then when I see it, I'm like, okay, this is going to work. Let me contact this person. And if I really can't find something, like for Astrophobia, the author and I couldn't find any good covers for space horror, so we had to have it custom made, But I try to avoid custom made covers. I just go for pre-mades because it's just so much easier to find them that way, and they're also cheaper.
And do you, like, when you put out your books, has it happened that you wanted to change the cover? Have you done that before?
Yeah, there are certain books that I've changed the covers for. For the Fertility Project, for example, the moment I changed the cover, basically the sales have doubled. So that's how much it happened. That's how much it changed. But for some other books, I changed it and nothing happened. So the cover plays a role, but if a book is bad, nothing can save it. A bad book is still going to be a bad book. Doesn't matter how you wrap it up. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why the readers stick, but it's interesting that especially genres like fantasy, epic fantasy, I think that's the most formulaic genre for that. And both titles and covers, I've seen like people made a series of videos on YouTube talking about what kind of titles are sticky and what type of covers are there. And then, like, for me, it's interesting that the advice is like, see what's in the best-selling category and like do that. And I was like, but does that not impact the way that you're found? If you're not a known author, I mean, wouldn't you like to stand out a bit? Of course, not doing something that's not corresponding with the genre, but something that's like a bit more interesting, not just like a series of 10 same the this of this and that with a dragon on the cover.
Yeah.
How many people are going to gravitate to that?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like that's the logical thinking. That's what I was thinking as well. You need to stand out. But the problem is the readers are very specific, and when they go searching for either a paranormal book or a creature feature or something like that, they look for specific kinds of covers, So what happens most of the time is they, if you stand out too much, it can have a negative impact, but you can also, if you do it right, if you play it right, if you have something that really grabs the eye, it's possible to have a different cover and still stand out. But for most of the cases, most authors who have been in this business for a long time, they try to have a certain kind of like cover that blends with the rest of the covers in the genre.
And that's one of the lessons that you learned along the way. But was there something that's maybe the most unexpected for you along your journey? You're in this business and as an author for a while now. And what was the most surprising thing for you when you started like picking up traction and figuring out the way to handle Amazon and getting your #1 bestseller tag? What did you learn that would maybe surprise a lot of people?
The thing is, it's like for Amazon, you never really know. Even when you think you've figured something out, it's just going to surprise you, and it's always going to happen once you think you've figured it out. So the best thing to do is just, publish books and hope for the best. There's just no way to crack it. Things are just changing all the time. I've heard so many different stories. And to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened that got me so much traction. Because I was running ads on Amazon for a very long time, and I thought they were doing something. Even though the dashboard showed that I was losing money, that was like something I was taught, like, it's okay, you just need to have visibility for your books. And I was spending like, $1,000, $2,000 a month just on ads. And what happened was then I just decided I'm going to turn them off. I want to see what happens. Are they doing anything? And they turned them off, and the sales were still the same. So that was a huge surprise for me that, all this time I had this illusion that they were doing something. And at the start, they probably were. They probably were when I still had no audience. But now that I have my readers, I have a lot of followers on Amazon. I don't need the ads to run so much, and I can just focus on organically publishing books and getting those sales from the readers.
And have you tried social media ads, Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, so I run Facebook ads from time to time. They are the most reliable when it comes to social media. They're the cheapest for the clicks as well. I have tried doing certain things on TikTok and Instagram and so on. TikTok is too random. I didn't get much traction there. Instagram is slow, but it does seem to work. But the ads on Facebook seem to be the most effective because the algorithm is just terrifyingly good. And it's like I used to have this thing that where I would set up an ad and I would try to make it as narrow as possible. Horror readers, Amazon readers, whatever. There's no need to do that. Nowadays you just click a certain option and they find the audience for you. You don't need to do anything. So you just choose which countries you want the ad to be shown. You upload a picture, you upload a text, and they're going to find the audience, and they are really, really good at doing that. It's scary good. So that's a really good thing. But whereas with Amazon, you need to do everything. You need to input like 1,000 keywords or whatever and hope that some of them work, and it takes so much time. So Facebook ads is really right now the best way to go simply because the algorithm is so trustworthy there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Facebook has perfected those audience tracking methods and pixels and everything with that. I think that it's really scary, as you said, how accurate they are. And have you considered crowdfunding? I know that I know it's not that big of a thing in horror space, but you must have seen the Brandon Sanderson one, the way that he shattered records on Kickstarter. Do you think that something like that would work for your work?
Yeah, so I've seen people do it. Brandon Sanderson's ones was it was impressive. It was just amazing how he did it. And I've heard so many authors who, they started like that. They started small, they blew up on social media, and they started getting huge followings. And, then naturally they can get good crowdfunding, Kickstarters, and whatever. There are even books and resources that tell you how to run your Kickstarters. And I've known people who have done it really successfully. I just haven't done it because simply it was too much of a pain for me. Because I want to mainly focus on writing. And that's the thing. It's if I could only do writing, I would do writing. But the problem is when you do self-publishing, you can't do just writing. You have to do everything. So eventually I'm going to have to go into crowdfunding for either audiobooks or maybe certain limited edition box sets and so on, because it does work. People buy that stuff. And, and my my skepticism was that people would not want to, who would want to buy something from a guy they never even heard about, but they do. They do support people like me, and that's the really, impressive thing that, you can actually get really good funding with those projects.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, when you think about the possibilities, it's awesome. Even you now, without that, you've sold both physical copies. You have paperbacks. I think you've had some hardbacks as well. And what about signed copies? Do those work? How people react to those?
Yeah, people love signed copies. They buy them a lot. However, the problem is me being based in Serbia, it's difficult to ship them at a reasonable price. So what happens is sometimes I'm going to do bundles and I'm going to price them higher simply because the shipping is just so expensive to the US. But it dissuades a lot of people from actually buying, even though they want to. In the US, it would have been so much easier because I would have had so many options, and 90% of my readers are in the US.
But there's no option to set that up in the US.
There's no option to set up any kind of signed thing. I would need to ship the books from the US to Serbia, and then from Serbia back to the US,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest problem because I can't, I try to choose, sending author copies from a closer country that has Amazon, like Italy and so on, but for some reason, you can only ship it from the US. So that means the shipping also is very expensive, and just going back and forth, it takes like $50 just for one book,
Yeah, that's a shame. I think that hopefully maybe when you do get some trad publishing support, that would be helpful. You said that one of the key things is that the publishers do take a lot of percentage of your earnings, but I think this is the key thing, that they do have the pulling power to make those things easier. Unfortunately,
they can make it easier. They can actually do all these promotions, these book signings and whatever, and they can do so many things that you can't as a self-published author.
And could we maybe see a book tour from you? Could you maybe see where your readers are based? Did you plan on going out and meeting them?
Yeah, actually, so next year there's an author con. I think it's called author con. No, Scares That Care. I think that's what it's called. It's in West Virginia, and I'm gonna head out there to meet some readers. I'm not gonna go as an author, because I've never been to any book signings and so on. So I just want to go there to scope out the area, see what's going on. And I'm going to, a lot of my readers said they were going to be there just specifically to meet me, which is really nice of them. So I'm going to bring some copies, hand them out and just see how that works. Because like I said, 90% of them are from the US. And many of them are just not going to be able to make it even there because it's such a huge country,
Yeah, of course, but it's really nice to hear that people are willing to come out just to meet you, and I can imagine that feels great.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned both the co-written book and the domestic thrillers. There are two in pre-order now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about those?
Right. So I had written these domestic thrillers a while ago. Originally, I wanted to publish them on a pen name because I didn't want to mix my horror and thriller genres. And I did publish one of them on a pen name, but it didn't do as well as I hoped it would. So I then decided I'm going to compare. I'm going to publish one in my name and see what happens. And so I did. It seems to be getting good traction. And what I'm doing now is basically the same thing that I did with my zombie series. So I put book 1 up for pre-order, and the link for book 2 is already at the end of book 1. And the link for book 3 is going to be at the end of book 2, and it's just going to be strung together like that so that, for the next 4 or 5 months, I'm not going to need to do anything. I just need to upload the books, and, Amazon is going to do the rest. So, yeah.
That sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, it's good for a while, but you get lazy if you let it flow for too long.
Hopefully it pans out. And before I let you go, you've talked about the books coming out and the con that you're going to next year. But when you think about next 5 to 10 years, what's kind of let's not say end game, because hopefully you'll be writing for many, many years. But what do you think would be a goal that's super ambitious? That's something you'd really like to see pan out in the future for you?
So it's the goalpost is always moving. My original plan, and I still stick to that, is I want to, and this is going to sound pretentious, maybe even laughable. I basically want to be the next Stephen King, which is going to be difficult to achieve because you do need publishers for that, and even then it's very, very questionable. But I'm taking it with baby steps. For now, I think I'm going to start to set up my own store where I'm going to sell books directly, look for publishers so that they can take me under their wing. And eventually maybe start going to some bigger interviews, to some signings and promotions, move across the world, get translations, get maybe a movie deal and so on, and just moving up in the world like that. There's really the sky is the limit, as they say.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. Boris, thank you so much for coming to Storyline Sessions. I wish you the best with all of your projects, and hopefully we'll see a movie from you and maybe a deal that Stephen King has.
Thank you. Hopefully we're going to see if that happens, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Storyline Sessions. You can find Boris on Instagram as well as his author website. I'll leave the links to those in the description, as well as links for everything else we've discussed in this episode. If you're interested in topics of creative writing and telling stories in any kind of media, keep following the Storyline Sessions, both here and on Instagram. There are new episodes coming each Thursday. I record this podcast using Riverside FM. It's a tool that I highly recommend, and if you'd like to try it out for yourself, you can find the link in the description that helps me out with a small commission without any additional cost to you. My name is Marko Bogdanovic, and I'll see you next time. Keep creating stories.